Well, hello again, KCIW listeners, and welcome to Curry Café. Every Sunday, producer and host and famous radio personality Ray Gary puts together a panel of volunteers and guests to discuss various topics of interest to our community. And for those that would like to participate in today's show with questions or comments, you can text in at 541-661-4098. That's 541-661-4098. And the phone is on the way. We're a little late with that, but it'll be here. So now here's Ray to tell us about today's show.
Okay, welcome again. My name is Ray Gary, and today on the Curry Café, we're going to be talking about environmental things, waste, and how do we get rid of waste, and why are we wasting stuff, I guess. I don't know. Now, Rick mentioned that text number, 541-661-4098. And if you wouldn't mind using that to keep us apprised of what's going on the Super Bowl. I don't know if there's anybody at the table cares, but other listeners might. Personally, I haven't paid a bit of attention to sports since the Dodgers left Brooklyn. I still grieve over that, by the way. Okay, we can go around the table now and have everybody introduce themselves, who they are, why they're here, and whatever else they want to say.
I'm Bill Gorham. I'm a Brookings resident of about 8 years now. I came from Southern California. I tell people I'm a marine biologist, or actually a recovering marine biologist, and that since retiring, I didn't get paid for anything, but actually I've given talks here on tide pooling and beachcombing to continue to educate people about the ocean. So I'm deeply involved in environmental stuff and climate change in particular.
Hi, I'm Michelle Carrillo. I grew up here in Brookings, and I live in Smith River. I have a small farm. I'm here because I'm interested in talking about sustainability, and a lot of the work that I do, I own and run a company called Think Place, and we do consulting with local governments, tribes, nonprofit organizations, businesses, with folks that want to work on really sticky issues in the community. It could be tackling issues around food insecurity, or it could be working on climate resilience, disaster preparedness. There's a lot of different things that don't have one perfect solution for it. And it takes people talking and trying to understand each other to get to some real solutions and a set of solutions and things we can do, both individually and collectively. So thanks for having me.
Hi, I'm Marina. I am what I just would consider a public educator at this point. I primarily do dog training, positive reinforcement dog training. With my business is Marina's Animal Adventures. Work like 2 days a week with that, and I have a few other jobs. I also am interested in holistic health coaching and environmental issues, so kind of sustainability across the board when it comes to concerns of just public everything, when we look at our day-to-day lives and the way that we do things, and science-related things are definitely of interest, in all directions, especially our beautiful coast and ocean that I've also lived here most of my life. I left for about 8 years into other places where I saw a little bit more intensity of heat changes and weather changes and stuff, but being back on the coast is really blissful, and it's nice to try to keep it that way.
Maybe one of you could start up by mentioning what you see here in Brookings or the coast or the area, whatever, as a problem that we could kind of relatively easily solve or work at solving.
I think I'm laughing here because Bill's putting me in the hot spot. He likes doing that. I think one of them's around how do we as a community share information. I think often there's so much information online and a lot of misinformation and sometimes disinformation. And it can get really confusing about trying to understand sometimes a complicated issue and figure out, well, where do I start? How do I find that out? And I think some of it happens to be when you can find good places to connect and get back in person with folks, and bring in folks that spend their life researching different topics. So Some of the issues around renewable energy has been kind of a learning journey for me. It's not something I went to school for. I do not espouse to be an expert on renewable energy. But in finding organizations and people that do study it, have really just found a lot of benefit in taking the time to educate myself and help bring in different guest speakers or find other folks that do, whether it's the Schatz Energy Research Lab out of Cal Poly Humboldt, or Oregon State University and the Extension Program. There's a lot of really great resources with folks that know how to talk about information and science in rural communities. Many of them are from and live in rural communities and can talk about the science-related topics and break them down into something that's a little easier to understand, right? We're not going to go over to OSU and maybe go through a whole course on the changing dynamics of wind. But, had a chance to hear from Jack Barth a couple weeks ago at the library. And I think that's really some great work that Southern Oregon Climate Action Now has been doing in partnership with Sea Grant. And then the Coalition for Common Ground is another group that's been really great to see us trying to work together to just bring in more of that information and hear directly from people working on renewable energy and what's it all about.
And I think that I was very fortunate to get to know Michelle through the Coalition for Common Ground. And it struck a very important chord for me because I am concerned about, as Michelle had said, misinformation and disinformation. Misinformation is people just don't have it right. Disinformation is where you purposefully are using information incorrectly to give a different perspective on things than is actually supported by the science and the data. And I particularly appreciated Michelle's ability to reach out to people, to include people, to identify ways to have good conversations. And right now there's so much polarization. Having those conversations and not looking at everybody else as either us or others and saying, where do we have common ground? Where are the things that we really share a great deal and not be pushed into one corner or another? And so I think that the offshore wind was an interesting example of how the polarization and the use of misinformation or disinformation has really has limited very strongly the conversations that people have. But because of the warming of the climate, and we know that January was the hottest January ever. Last year, 2024, was the hottest year ever on record, exceeding only 2023, which was the hottest year on record. And just the empirical data say that things are changing. There's nothing that we can dispute about that. What's really in question is, what do we do about it? And we do need to have that those discussions and respect of people from their perspective. So that's one of the reasons that we're interested in this talk today, to see how do we share, how do we get things going.
How do we convince the people who say, well, the climate has changed many times, it's gotten warmer and colder, and this is just another cycle?
They are correct. It has changed. And I mean, there are plenty of examples of very hot times and very cold glacial times. And the difference is the time scale.
Right.
So we're talking on the order of tens of thousands of years. I mean, it's interesting. The Native Americans supposedly came across on land bridge. I say supposedly because there's still debate as to how all that happened, but they've been here for time immemorial as it's presented. And in that time, there have been glaciers that have taken over much of North America. And so things have changed dramatically. But that's on the order of 10,000 years. And now what we're having changes on the order of 10 years. And the ecology accommodates 10,000-year cycles, not 10-year cycles.
10,000 years, we could adjust a little.
Well, it's that nature could.
Yeah, even nature, yeah.
Right, whether or not humans can. I mean, what's livable? That's my question. Is a certain point.
Well, I'm wondering that too. What is livable? What is the when does a place become so hot that it's no longer habitable? Not what?
It's a combination of the absolute temperature and the humidity. So as things get more humid, your tolerance for warmer temperatures goes down. And that where it's dry in the desert, it's very hot, you perspire a lot. You need to, if you can replace the water, you can tolerate the hotter temperatures. But if it's very humid, then at a lower temperature, your body just cannot get rid of the extra heat.
And aren't we already having more heat deaths than we ever had before in some of these miserable hot summers?
Some of the good examples, apparently, and I don't remember the exact number, but it was the, the Muslim pilgrimage.
Oh, the Hajj.
The Hajj.
Yeah.
Something like 1,000 people died, something like that. So these are events that are previously unheard of. Yeah. I mean, we've always had extreme events. What's happening now is those extreme events are happening more frequently, more intensity.
Well, and I think about it from a farming perspective. Like, you have to try to plan ahead. And like, I don't do farming to it's an offset in our income. It's not the only thing we do. But I think about that for people that depend on those crops, depend on the reliability and consistency of where you're planting, when you plant, what kind of things you can grow. The food and the animals, whatever you're producing, relies heavily on the climate. And the more consistent you are, then you actually can invest long term. But when we have these rapid changes, that's really hard to run a business. It's really hard to be able to feed people when you have that. And I'm curious too, I know you've spent a lot of time with permaculture, and
I wouldn't say a lot of time, but enough to gain some awareness that, yeah, it's exactly that. I mean, just remembering my studies of looking at different zones and how your gardening practices will change per zone. And then when you look at the changes that have been happening in each of those zones, like, on the coast, we have microclimates. And so each area has a little bit of difference, and checking in with other places can help. But, observing is one thing, and then seeing, the difference between seasons to the last chunk of years. And like Bill was talking about, these changes that are happening fast and dramatically. I think the most shocking times is when we look at the floods and then the droughts and the fires and those things that, some of us don't see because, we don't get a lot of that on the coast all the time. It just depends on your region. And it's shocking, when you realize that there's all these other places that are being massively affected by extreme changes in weather and patterns and whatever. But the permaculture aspect always, talks about sustainability and how you are going to get through your next chunk of crops, because that's really what it is what's sustainable. Because, yeah, you can get a crop this year, but if you don't next year, like, are you able to see that ahead of time because you've been watching the patterns and all of those things? And if you aren't aware, then you're doomed for something that you didn't prepare for.
And along those lines, in California, now I'm not an expert on this, but the whole state pretty much is big on almonds. And I mean, I love them. The almond blossoms are beautiful in the spring, but they're very water intensive. I think it's the most water intensive crop around. And I think a lot of the farmers down there now are, I guess you would call them mega farmers. They're not, small family farms too much anymore. But anyway, they still continue to want to grow the almonds because they're very financially good.
Yeah, there's a lot of...
But it isn't kind of like maybe we should be thinking about time to change that and do something else. That's
a really fair point. I think that looking at just food intakes and looking at food choices and things like that can really help, voting with your dollars as far as, the foods that are economical versus not, and, those that are taking a lot of water. Yeah, the hard part is for a lot of folks, for myself, like in health coaching, I have to, eat differently because of certain foods that don't do well in my system. And so almond flour has taken over a lot of the grain-free type of diets and alternative diets and things like that. So like a lot of nut-based foods have been put into our foods, which is really great, but they're expensive, and it takes a lot to produce that. So getting into innovation of designing foods, like fun foods essentially that can help change the direction of things that aren't economical is difficult.
Yeah. And not so environmentally damaging.
Right.
Want to remind everybody, too, if you have questions or comments, you can text in, please, 541-661-4098.
We're getting close to kickoff, so if you would keep us informed in case there's somebody that cares. Seems like a silly thing to care about to me, but a lot of people would disagree with that.
One of the things sort of following up, Marina, what you were talking about is people have habits. You're used to certain things, certain foods.
Yes.
Some of them are health related. Some of them are just habits.
Yeah.
One of the challenges I think that would be good to get people to pick up on is preparing or developing recipes that are consistent with the foods that are available, and yet are also consistent with what people's expectations ought to be. And whether it's various types of fishes, various vegetables, things that are there, people aren't used to them, but with the good recipes that can then be introduced, or people get introduced to that and say, oh, well, this actually tastes good, this grain or that veggie. What are your thoughts about how is it to, or are there existing good recipes for?
Oh, that is such an excellent question. I mean, you've got 1,000,001 different types of diets, and each one of them are different because paleo versus Mediterranean versus keto versus whatever, grain-free or they all have their place. And personally, when I did my health coaching, I always followed the blood type diet. So it's whatever your body type or your blood type is generally dictates what is best for your body. So O is primitive versus A is agrarian. And so A's would be more prone towards, nuts and seeds and not as much meat products, dairy and grains and those things that had developed more so when we were in a time of famine, when we developed other styles of food rather than the caveman diet, which is O blood type, also paleo, is the meats and vegetables and the things that you would hunt and gather for. So depending on your body type, dictates sort of what's best for your system. And so, if somebody wants to be vegan, that's great, but will that work for your body? Because you have to feed it the right amount of nutrients for what your blood asks for. Because if you don't, then you're going to get sick. But there's, following fad diets, it's to me, again, it's always about sustainability. Because if you try a certain type of diet and it's not going to work for you, it's not sustainable, well, then you're going to go off of it and you're going to go right back where you were with your habits. And so you have to find something that makes the most sense economically, budget-wise, what actually tastes good, what feels good, what you enjoy, and that's where I have a hard time because I like carbs, but I can't eat a lot of carbs because it makes me sick. So I have to kind of find, okay, well, where are the alternatives that I can make things that aren't going to break my budget and also break the economic budget, because that's really hard. So it's what I call bio-individual. You have to kind of do the research to find out in your own body what's needed and everything else that comes together. So it's not an easy question to answer.
And along with that, what about trying to eat, I've heard this off and on, trying to eat as local as you can? And we talked a little bit about this at the SoCan. I go back to going into the markets and seeing the 10,000 plastic, and they're plastic, the little stickers on fruit. I can't stand that.
Yeah.
We have a farmer's market here. Now, granted, I came from the Yuba City area, agriculture. The farmer's market there was the best I've ever been to. And this doesn't have as much variety, but it's still there. Mm-hmm. And it's local stuff. You don't have to do the stickers. And they even have local beef. And I don't know, Michelle, maybe do you guys have local? beef?
We don't have anything that we sell at the market. So we raise coonies. They're a pasture pig.
Okay.
So they're like a heritage breed from New Zealand.
Okay.
They don't root the soil, and so we practice rotational grazing. So we've got a small flock of sheep, and we'll rotate them on our pasture, and then we bring the coonies through, and they'll graze. And the idea is that you're having those different kinds of animals eat down the grass, and then bringing in the next animal introduces different kind of microbiomes in the soil, and it makes it healthier. And then we have chickens. So
Like rotating crops.
Rotating, yeah. Because what we find is that and again, I'm not an expert in this. I've learned from other really incredible farmers that are practicing these strategies. But the problem we've gotten into in the U.S. especially is our large-scale commercial operations that hyper-concentrate one kind of animal on a small plot of land, and they strip all the nutrients, but then they introduce a lot of different bacteria and different kinds of disease. And you put that's how we get E. coli breakouts. That's how we get a lot of the unhealthy things in our food. And so if you can spread out you're not creating as much impact with hyper-concentrated kind of animals, you're rotating things through, then the parasites they don't get tailored to one type of animal.
Right.
You mentioned before this blood type diet. That's a new one I haven't heard of. And it seems like every day there's a new diet that I haven't heard of. And I get almost all my news from the only real true news service, and that's YouTube. And I try to be careful with what I eat. So every now and then I'll check, see whether or not I should be eating a certain thing. And not long ago I checked oatmeal. Sounds pretty good. That's not overly processed. You don't really do anything bad. But I'll go to YouTube and there'll be a what happens if you eat oatmeal every day thing. And it tells you your system's going to clog up and you're going to die.
Very good question.
In a week. The next panel is how healthy oatmeal is. And I've gotten out of where I pretty much eat spinach. I haven't seen too much bad on spinach. But
spinach is pretty good.
I don't know.
I think if you're ever questioning a food, the best thing to do is to eat whatever baseline foods that do well for you, that you feel good. And then
we're talking tequila so far, but go ahead.
Yeah, so it's called an
it,
elimination diet. So whatever food you're testing, you take it out for 2 to 3 weeks at least, so it's not in your system. And whatever your baseline is of the foods that are good, you're feeling good, and then you try that food, and then you give it a day or 2, sometimes 3 days before you'll notice if there's any brain fog or stomach cramps or things that are occurring that you realize, oh, that's the one thing that's changed in my diet, and you can find out whether or not there's an issue. It's just a rough kind of idea to let you know whether or not a food is good or not.
Huh. Well, that's interesting. I also have a limited ability to cook, too. My general recipes have to start out with 5 minutes on high. And if they have more than one paragraph in the instructions, I don't buy it. Anyway, I didn't want to turn this into a diet show.
But I think going back to my reason why I think about seasonality and buying local, one, you're able to invest in your local community. Those dollars get respent in our community, and you have more circulation of those dollars than if you go to a big box store and buy from there, or you pay for it on Amazon and get it shipped to your house. That it's going back into the community.
Absolutely.
But then also the cost of transportation. Are we having, what is that cost of things getting shipped over here? And just thinking about the trucking and gas, and again, back to that reducing,
emissions for sure. I think that's a really valid point. I mean, it's always, you always want to shop local when you can. And I think a lot of time, the question is quality, right? And then you'll have all these beautiful looking fruits and vegetables in the store, but
They're
why
junk.
why are they looking so good? What kind of chemicals are preserving them for how long versus the not so pretty stuff that might be in the market or whatever. I mean, you can even get some really good quality stuff at the markets. And I think that what I've noticed is I'm wondering which farms are contributing to the farmers markets versus selling out of their own spots. And do the people that go to the farmers market, do they know where to get all these other things that, there's plenty of other farms that sell, but where are they selling and is it accessible? And I don't know, I think that might be something that we can take a look at is getting all of the farms connected and seeing, which ones do contribute or want to contribute to community and if they, need to do something to do that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I know there's some really cool examples, like in Del Norte County, there's the Del Norte Food Policy Council. It's a group of volunteers that get together, and they've done a lot around creating like these farm calendars and food guides that talk about some of that and put it into resources. And I know there's some really great, I think about like Kathleen Dixon with Otter Bees, and just the CSAs, right? The community supported agriculture. So who are those people that do know where all those farmers are, and they help source? And like, that's what, Kathleen's done that for, I think 15 years now. She's who I call when I'm like, hey, where do the blueberries come from? Like, where can I get some good blueberries?
Right. Yeah.
Did she put out anything locally, like where anybody could access that information? Because that's good info.
Yeah. CSA is Community Supported Agriculture. She has a website.
Okay.
And I do believe most CSAs are sort of delivery. You don't go to like the farmer's market. You kind of get on, I think she has a website, and you select what you want. Like, you put it in your cart, and then they have like a certain time that they do their orders, and then you can either go collect it from a certain spot, or I don't know exactly how their delivery service works, but it's basically like shopping online, but that it's
they're local.
Local, yeah.
Well, that's huge.
Her company is Otter Bees?
Otter Bees, yeah. Yeah, their supply is sometimes a little bit limited, depends on what your needs are, but I've heard really great things about them. Yeah.
And it's interesting, I think, that, and one of the points I was trying to make earlier is because you can't go to Kathleen or other local farms and get exactly what you want every day, then if you know how you can cook some of the things that are available, that's where it's going back to finding recipes that are keyed into what's available at different times of the year. And not telling people you can't eat this. Here's an alternative to say, instead of that, try this because it's available now. So that's where the creativity comes in.
Absolutely.
And the sharing it.
Yeah, Master Food Preservers is another one that I love because that's the idea of okay, you get when you're growing a crop, so we'll have apples. We have 8 apple trees on our farm. And so we have, during the apple season, we have more apples than you know what to do with. So then that's where you get into preserving and what are the different creative ways you can preserve things and extend your access to apples through the year with different kinds of things. But the Oregon State University Extension Service, they have a Master Food Preservers program. And they will, you can go borrow canning equipment. You can ask them, what are the safety protocols? They have salsa recipes. They have and they're all, the safety standards are there, right? So you're getting good information. And there's really helpful people who can talk to you about, hey, my last batch of apple butter didn't quite turn out. What do you think I did wrong? And they'll talk to you about it or say, oh, you might want to change the amount of pectin that you add or different things.
If I were to buy an apple tree the size they have at Home Depot, 5 or 6 feet tall, it looked like, how long would it be before that was producing apples?
It depends on the age and size, right? If you're going to spend more money on a more mature tree,
right,
that means you're going to get closer to producing. We have a couple different mixed fruit trees that we planted 3 years ago, and they're now producing. Oh. So, those are the ones that are about head height, and we got a crop this year. So we've got plums and peaches and apples and pears. It's great. And we're in Smith River, so again, we're microclimate. It's a little bit nicer for fruit.
Doing crop rotations, which a lot of, I don't know how many farms don't do. If your soil is basically being taken from constantly and you're not replenishing it, then that's going to affect how much you're going to get. especially when you plant, like you can buy a lot of plants from, Weimar or Costco or whatever, and they're bare root. And I think I've planted like 6 apple trees, and I've got one that actually started producing apples like last year. And I think we planted 3 years ago-ish. And I put, some good fertilized soil in with it, but I think that the rest of the loamy soil around it wasn't strong enough to like really give it. So it's like you have to keep putting stuff in there if your soil isn't ready for growth and producing things that are meant to produce. Then you have to doctor it. You have to keep giving it the stuff that it needs, because otherwise it's going to take a long time because it needs the nutrients.
I have some avocado that I've planted, and I have one that I'm keeping in the house as a potted plant because it's pretty nice looking, except that the schedule is slow. I just trimmed a bunch of brown leaves off this morning. But I have a couple that I planted outside, and when I planted them, they were probably 18 inches or 20 inches, and they're still the same size after 2 or 3 years. And maybe that's the problem. I need to fertilize or something like that. But
possibly. There's a lot of avocados, I think, that don't produce. I think it depends on where it started.
I didn't really plant them to
create
grow
avocados.
I bought these avocados, and I know you can do something with the pits. And I hate throwing something away that you can do something with. So
I've done that before. It was fun. They're very cool.
I used to live on a homestead in Alaska, and you don't throw anything away when you're on a homestead 100 miles from the place where you can buy it. If you need 6 2x4s, you buy 10. And you save those others in the event that it actually didn't require that. Speaking of a homestead, one of the things we did there, because when we first maybe 10 years we lived there, we didn't have the availability of being on the grid or a telephone for that matter. So we produced our own electricity primarily with solar panels, and then we had a windmill that was good for year-round stuff. And I'm kind of disappointed to find out that regardless of how you look at it here, you can't make it pay. I think it would cost, I don't know, a couple of grand to just put solar. When I first bought an electric car, I thought, well, it'd be nice to set up a little solar array and I can charge it with this. And because I didn't realize how big a solar array that would take. But my electric bill this month was $163, and in the summer it goes way down, way below $100. So I can't really justify financially. I could do it ethically if I were a rich man, but
yeah, I think for our farm, we're definitely looking at it, and we're in Smith River, so there's some different incentives that the state does. I was talking to a friend that did the development for Tolowa-Dani Nation. They built 21 housing units in Smith River, and all of those are built with solar power. And he said it's been extremely cost beneficial. So if you're looking at like new builds, especially, and can build it in as you go, is one. That it was really cool to hear how they're doing that. And I think for us, we just got hit with the rate hike after the Smith River fire a couple of years ago. They had to bring in diesel generators to run the whole county while we didn't have power. And that cost, we're now seeing it a couple of years later. We got a letter that said, we're going to increase your rates right before winter. Our power bill, we looked at our usage. We're about the same usage as we were last year. We are almost double our rate. So we're definitely looking at it for our farm. And again, but it's hard, right? I don't know where you get the financing to put that in.
Well, yeah, you keep hearing about tax rebates and different things like that, but I would really like to do that. In Alaska, we had we had a very small house. It was built to be energy efficient. And all summer long, we did very, very well on solar panels. And if you came to visit us, you wouldn't even realize that we didn't have regular. We had a big television and a microwave and all the stuff that people have. It worked out very well for us.
One of the things that we talked about, haven't really been able to pull it together, but it's kind of like what the Tolowa did in terms, because the fellow that did work on our house was a contractor for all those houses. And I was talking to Mark about how did he find the resource, or how did he find the people that were able to do the installation of the solar panels. And it was a company that came in, you have a contract to do, was it 21 houses, I think? And so all of a sudden, it means that if you have a crew come, you can have them do installation on one, then start on the next, and then different people can be working very cost effectively. Trouble is here, I've tried several times to find a contractor that would even come to give me an estimate and then actually say, this is what we could do. It's very expensive and very hard to find somebody that you feel comfortable that they know what they're doing and are going to be able to do a good job.
If you have an electric company that buys back the electricity, the overproduction or whatever you call it, then that works very well. But we don't have that here, evidently. Since I've left Alaska, the electric company there now does that, and I had a friend visit me this last summer, and he has a huge solar array now. He's been big on alternate energy forever, but he said he gets money back. It pays for it.
Well, that's where the incentives come in very strongly. To give a rebate. Of course, then the California Energy Commission has changed their rates in California about what sort of I don't want to say kickbacks, but
incentives,
yeah. the refunds or the buybacks, or whatever the right terminology is. But it's easy to give to say that's perfect for everybody, except that there are enough people that can't afford to buy the systems, and then somebody has to pay for the grid, all the infrastructure,
keep everything going.
Yeah, and so it's interesting, not to change the topic too much, but kind of like you buy an EV and now you're not paying for gasoline, and the gasoline taxes are what pay for the roads. And so, well, what's the equitable way of making sure the people that are using the roads are actually contributing to that?
By charging me $300 for plates. That's one way.
Yeah, and that's the sort of thing that the kind of communications that we need, the conversations. And that's why I go back to what Michelle is doing effectively, is to try to bring people together to have those conversations, to say, well, there are problems we have to deal with. How do we deal with it?
Somebody told me that in California, all new housing construction has to have solar. Is that true?
I don't think that's true. I come from still in California in Smith River, but I had to do a quick comparison. We're talking about electric bills. So I have some family there that is totally against solar, and it's pluses and minuses. But they did have I think they have a 1,500 square foot home in the middle of summer. Their electric bill was over $800. PG&E.
Yep.
And PG&E is a whole other thing. How much fraud there is in some of that, I don't know, but I know that's and I think that's myself kind of due to some climate change there. The hot summers just, to me, keep getting hotter. And again, that's the flat valley down there.
The data support that.
And again, being in Smith River, God, I feel so lucky because I don't have an air conditioner where I live now. I don't have
Don't
to.
need it.
And I just feel real lucky that we live in this wonderful climate.
It's kind of interesting because as several people have mentioned the microclimate here. I think it's amazing. I was at a call yesterday with people in the Rogue Valley, and they were living in Jackson, and they had not been able to get to the store for a week because they had 17 inches worth of snow. And so it's like, okay. And they asked if we'd had any snow, and I said, well, we had some sleet, but it was gone before it, And so the interesting thing about that is here in Curry County, for much of Curry County, we aren't seeing the dramatic differences in the climate. And it always astounded me. We've driven from Medford back to Brookings and had a 50-degree temperature difference.
Yeah.
And when you recognize that we don't have the fluctuations in cold or heat that most other people are experiencing, it's easy to kind of get lulled into comfort that, well, climate change is not that big a deal. But there are other things. And the other aspect I mentioned, I'm a marine biologist, and so I'm concerned about the ocean. And there's some very interesting graphs that show the changes in carbon dioxide. It's in a research station at the top of the mountains in the Big Island in Hawaii. And it shows continuing increases in temperature, continuing increases in carbon dioxide. The other part of it is that carbon dioxide dissolves into the ocean, and so it becomes carbonic acid. And that has shown an equal change in the pH, so it has gotten more and more acidic, which is a real problem because it changes how the critters that live there are able to reproduce. Anything that produces a shell is going to be requiring calcium carbonate to grow its shell. And if you're a big crab or a clam or something like that, it's okay. But when you're a tiny little larva and you're just starting out, that takes a lot of energy, which means there are fewer of those that are going to be able to survive, which means if you've got fewer larvae, you've got fewer adults. And crabs are a really, really big issue here. Salmon are as well. And salmon love small marine snail, or sort of a type of swimming snail called pteropods. And they have shells, and their shells are showing changes because of the pH change. So we're lucky that we're pretty much insulated from the dramatic changes, but they're out there and they're already going to be, if not manifesting currently, they will be.
And on that point about, and Bill, your marine biology, but before I do, we're kind of winding down. I just want to remind everybody, text line 541-661-4098.
And we do have listeners that are concerned with who's winning, so if you can just fill us in on that.
But anyway, Bill, I want to go one of my pet peeves, the plastics craziness that we have. Do you, because your specialty is the shore and the tide pools, and I know I was just reading something, this has been out there for a while, that they're finding microplastics in the bottom of the Mariana Trench, 6 miles deep. Do you see some of that here right along the shore?
I had a conversation just like that this morning, as a matter of fact, walking the dogs. And the fellow that I was walking with had picked up a piece of stringy plastic. And he said, he picks it up on a regular basis. And the comment was not that, wow, there's a piece of plastic here. The comment was, there's only one piece of plastic here. And so as my comment was, we have a beach cleanup days on a regular basis. Trouble is they are scheduled to be convenient for doing beach cleanup days. They're not scheduled to go and pick up the massive amount of trash that comes in after winter storms. To the extent that I have actually filled up our trash can, a big trash can, after 2 days, 3 days worth of picking up the big stuff from the beach. And that's because of the amount of crap that's out there in the ocean gets disturbed with the storms, and it does get washed ashore. And so that's the big stuff. But if you recognize it, it does start to break down. It breaks down into microplastics, which are on the order of probably 5 centimeters, or maybe a quarter inch, down to a tenth of an inch. And then you have nanoplastics, which are basically the small building blocks of that. And that can then go across the blood-brain barrier, a placental barrier, so it can get in everywhere. And it's not that we haven't had it before. Well, plastics are relatively new, so we didn't have that before. But now we're learning more and more of where these are going, and we have virtually no information as to what the effects are. And if you put enough things in enough organs in enough time, probably something's not doing things right.
It's been in the news lately that we each have about a teaspoon of plastic in our brain.
I've heard a variety of different estimates like that, but it is frightening.
Yeah.
I walk Crissy Field pretty much every day. I try to, not raining. And after those storms, the amount of trash that I see in the seaweed, all that stuff that's spoken. I mean, it's sickening, actually, and I've taken out trash bags myself.
Yep.
And, well, yeah, and then who knows where that comes. That can come from miles and miles away, I suppose. I've seen tires and all kinds of stuff. But it does bother me, like especially I'll say 4th of July, to walk the beach the next day. The fireworks, detriment, crud is all over. Nobody picks it up. I shouldn't say nobody. Some people do. Right. But we're just, I don't know, a lot of us don't seem to care about that. On this beautiful beach, anywhere. But really, in a beach setting like that with whales and the otters and everything, and you're just going to dump your stuff right there. Yeah. It's amazing.
One of the things that I sort of want to bring to the plastics beyond the microplastics and the things that are in our systems and all is what's the incentive to make plastics? Mm-hmm. Well, if you're an oil company, you produce oil to have it as a fossil fuel. If you have electrification of everything, what do you do with the oil? You're a petrochemical company then. And the best thing you can do is to have single-use plastics, plastic bags, plastic water bottles, anything like that, because then you have a market for all the time having to sell oil to the petrochemical companies to make the plastics.
Well, that was like I was looking up food dyes, and it's another byproduct. Like the majority of food dyes are actually a petrochemical. So it's not even food that we're putting into our food. And you're seeing some regulation over it, and they're starting to remove it from certain food products. But all of that is just to follow the money.
Right. Profit, yeah. Bottom line, right? I mean, buy a pair of socks lately and find those little tiny plastic brads that they put 3 or 4 in there for no reason. I mean, why?
Well,
agreed.
They're getting plastic industry must be making some money on that.
You can be pretty sure they are. They're not hurting.
No,
and that's why Exxon and Chevron. I know for sure Exxon has in their business plan they are going heavy into plastics and making the raw materials that can then be spun into anything from acrylic shirts to plastic toothbrushes to shaving bodies. So plastics are fantastic. They've done a huge amount. There's no question about that. So, but what do we do with the waste? What do we do with the costs of that? So they talk about their externalities. It means that the companies that produce it don't have to deal with the consequences, don't have to get rid of it. So if we actually had the people that are making money from making that stuff to then have to take care of it, that'd be a whole different story. I mean, think about it as you bring things home and you use them up and you put them in the trash. If that got to be picked up for free, then why not do it? If instead you got charged for every pound of trash you threw away, then all of a sudden you'd be a good incentive to use less of things, do more recycling, decide can you get compostable stuff? What are the ways you can reduce your wastes?
Well, the more and more we hear about recycling, though, the less effective it seems to be. Yeah. Like we'll get a country to take some of our waste with the idea that they're going to do something with it, and what they do with it is take it out to a dump someplace, and it's all piled up there.
Or the ocean.
And then
going into the ocean, and yeah.
And then it gets out to the gyre in the middle of the ocean, and then you have a storm, a hurricane, and it gets distributed, and that's when we see it coming onto our shores.
So I have all these, everybody has plastic things they buy, and then you're supposed to look at the number and this and that, and then you hear that it doesn't matter what the number is, it's all probably not going to be recycled in any useful way anyway.
I feel like that's looking for products that you can have, like find the alternative. So laundry detergent, they have the little laundry sheets that come in a cardboard box.
I heard you talking about that the other night. I've never seen that before, and I'm going to look for that.
I love them because, those things are heavy. And it's like it's so easy to throw something in.
I'd buy one of those jars or jugs or whatever that you lay on your side, and that'd probably last me 2 years. So I'm not using a lot of plastic in that regard, but I would like to do something different.
It's interesting.
And I'd be surprised if those big jugs have the right number on them. I don't know.
They probably do. But as you said, it's great because you can recycle them, but do they actually go anywhere and do anything?
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that's interesting, a big issue now, or a big push, is pods. So it's pods that you put in your dishwasher, pods that you put into your washing machine.
Mm-hmm.
And because I was curious, I looked at the sheets that we've got that say it's biodegradable and all this is wonderful, but they have, and I'm not going to get the terminology right exactly, but it's basically dissolvable polyvinyl, and polyvinyl is an oil byproduct. And vinyl, so it's like it's with the right amount of, I'll say, water in the system, they do dissolve in water. But what is left are the nanoplastics or the little bits of. So even the sheets that are talking about they are very environmentally sound. It's like, well, what about those little molecules that are left from that? Is there a problem? So I looked at the manufacturers, and they tout that this is completely normal. There's nothing, no information, no data to say there's a problem. And then you look at the literature, and there are people that say, in fact, there is a problem. I do lead to this, we think. And there's not enough information to say yes or no. And that's when I come back to, we need conversations when we have people that can say this is an issue, and then we go and look and see what the resource is, see what information we have. Just because we don't have information that says it's a problem doesn't mean it's not a problem.
And the manufacturers have to be part of that too, I think.
Mm-hmm. They do.
I mean, it's hard. Well, no, it's not hard for us, but yeah, their bottom line is profit only. I don't think they care if there were 10 million nanograms of microplastics in whatever product they put out. That's my opinion. Mm-hmm. But we are running out of time, and I got a text. I wanted to read this, please. Linda, it says, for listeners wondering about Otterbees, their website is oh boy, I didn't have my glasses. Otterbeesmarket.com. And Otterbees, Otterbees, Otterbeesmarket.com. They have a fairly good selection of local seasonal produce and some locally caught fish. We regularly order from them, and their delivery is excellent. We have a cooler chest on our front porch once a week, and Otterbees delivers our order the next morning. Works really well for our household. One more note, I think they only deliver to the Brookings area. Also, they have a helpful weekly email newsletter. Well, I'm not in the Brookings area, but I'll still give it a try. Smith River, who knows?
You can always have it delivered to a friend's house and then pick it up from them.
Ray, store some for me.
There you go.
Yeah, okay.
So here we go. No, that's good info, and thank you, Linda.
You're going to waste a lot of fuel getting up to my house.
I'll walk. I need to walk.
Oh, okay. I'll pick your body up somewhere along.
Okay. Anyway,
I heard you talking earlier, you're considering having that environmentally disposed of?
About what you talking about?
Something about funerals?
Well, yeah. I had an article in the, I get the Eureka paper occasionally, and there's a new burial, macabre subject, but a burial method, if you will. And had I known about it, I would do it, but it's still a year or two out. They basically put your body in the ground. No, nothing else, no casket, no fluid, no nothing. And you just usually try to get it near a tree where the tree can use you, and you just go wherever. I think that sounds cool. And it's going to be called, I don't have the name there.
Green burials.
Green burial. And then they've already got a plot of land. It's about a year or two away. I just thought it was a good idea because...
It probably costs 3 times as much as a regular funeral, is it?
You know what? I highly doubt it. I don't know. We'll
just
see
for the
what
permit.
The cost is. Yeah, right. Anyway, yeah, that's an environmentally sound problem solved, maybe.
Yeah, I do. One thought I had, and going back to a little bit, we were talking about businesses and kind of following the money. I had an opportunity to have a conversation with the head of the Walmart Foundation a couple months back, and he was sharing about, like, when you get into these social benefit issues, like, how do you make the case to businesses to invest in something that's good for people or good for the planet? And he said that from a sustainability perspective, that is actually something Walmart is investing in now and has to, because they ran the business case. In 20 years, they won't exist at the scale of what they consume. And they have to, that they're looking at that from a futures perspective and saying, oh, well, if we want our business to exist in 20 years, we actually have to invest in sustainable farming and agriculture. And they've changed their policies around what they dump, what kind of clothing and things that used to go into landfill, that now they are trying to do full circle. So it was an interesting one of saying, we know.
That's incredible.
Of Walmart, of all
yeah.
corporations. That's shocking, but that's a positive note.
That is a heck of a step in the right direction.
We're going to have to somehow combine profitability and a clean environment one of these days. Mm-hmm. We just can't keep going like we're going, I don't think.
Well, that's where there's a lot of discussion about is sustainability and capitalism, can they mutually coexist? And the one theme that seems to go is if the costs were properly allocated. So a price on carbon, if you're going to be producing a bunch of plastics, then you have to pay for that plastic pollution because somebody else has to take it out of the water, say at a sewage treatment plant, or you buy filters. I just saw today on the internet that you can get a filter for your wastewater coming out of your laundry machine, your washing machine, and that takes out the 90% or 95% of the microplastics. So it's like, oh, okay. So a question that keeps coming back, well, all this climate stuff, who pays for it? We do.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we all do.
We all do.
Even the corporations who are making the money hand over fist one way or the other. Right.
Maybe years ago when we used to have organization, I guess it still exists, but we don't hear about it much, called zero population growth.
Oh, yeah.
I think that would be every time I see these politicians talking about, we have to have the beautiful babies. No, we don't. We got enough of them.
Well, that's where
population is part of it.
Yes.
Yeah, very much so.
I think it's always helpful when you look at sustainability that you vote with your dollars, and it's really hard to do that when you're on a budget. But, if you can figure out what things are priorities in your life, and where you can possibly make an adjustment, pay a little bit more money for this one thing and then not have these other things. Sometimes that can make a really big difference. Even, one person does that and then you talk to your friends about it and then they start doing it, there's that ripple effect.
And that's what the SOCAN meeting was about too. Uh-huh. Part of it anyway. And looking forward to the next one. Hey, we're almost out of time. We're down to about 2 minutes. Ray, you want any words of wisdom to end the program today, or anybody else what they want to say?
I think I've used them all up. By the time it gets back to me, I'll be ready to go again.
Well, I'll jump off your comment and a pitch for SOCAN. And we got Coastal SOCAN. We're trying to build a community to get more conversations going, get people engaged in a variety of activities that fit with what they like to do, what they're able to do. And that would be either teaching people how to write cards or letters, sustainable gardens, community solar, various things like that. We just need people that'll want to pitch in and do something with a good group.
Okay.
And I would just say, the question I always hold is, do I want to leave this place better than the way I found it? And we live in one of the most pristine, beautiful places. And so what's our responsibility to take care of our community? We're in tight relationship with this community. And I think there's a responsibility to that we've got to lean into.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, I think that's kind of one of those old camping rules. Whatever you pack in, you pack out. Make it look better than it did. And if you saw anything, you pick it up on your way. It's just one of those things that, just like you don't want to, take a dump in your own bed. It's the same thing, it's all, this is, yeah, you get the picture, how are you treating your front yard? How are you, what kind of things are you putting into the space that you live in, and taking care of things best you can.
Okay, we're about done here today. Thanks, everybody. And just to remind everybody, you're listening to KCIW LP 100.7 in beautiful Brookings, Oregon. and let's keep it beautiful. Thanks to all.